This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. A cattle market update with livestock economist Derrell Peel from Oklahoma State University begins today's show. He discusses trade and the Cattle on Feed report. Continuing the show is Antonina Broyaka, K-State Extension Associate in the Department of Agricultural Economics, with an update on Ukraine. She covers the financial state they are currently at and their goals for 2024. K-State Wildlife and Outdoor Enterprise Management student Lilly Nelsons concludes today's show by sharing why she came to K-State and how WOEM is helping her for the future. That and more is coming up ahead on Agriculture Today. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our Monday show with a cattle market update. And this week we're joined by Oklahoma State University livestock economist Derrell Peel. Derrell, thanks for joining us today.
You bet. Happy to be here.
Derrell, starting off our cattle market conversation, as we normally do, with what is cash looking like?
I tell you what, these cash markets have been really strong, especially for the feeder cattle. You know, in the month of February, at least in Oklahoma auctions, we've set new all-time record prices, and they've continued strong each week of the month here. And so, we continue to see those prices, moving ahead to all unprecedented levels.
Were you surprised that you guys were setting record prices?
No, not really. I mean, we've been expecting these higher prices in general. Timing is always a question. And of course, it's, if we had no trend in the market, we would be expecting seasonally higher prices here in the first quarter of the year. So part of it is probably a bit of a seasonal effect, but really this is an underlying trend that's related to just the generally tighter cattle numbers. We've been building towards this really for the last several years, and I think it's really now being manifest in the market.
And something we're going to continue to see in the market, or kind of a one and done for 2024?
No, I think this is probably not the highest prices. The bigger picture from a cattle cycle perspective is that the highest prices will occur several months after we start really retaining heifers for herd rebuilding. And right now, we don't have any evidence that we're doing that. I would say there's some chance that some of the stocker cattle that have been out this winter may actually be some of our first heifer retention. We won't know that for a few months. But the point is, we've got a long ways to go. It's going to take a lot of heifer retention, and that'll really squeeze feeder supplies and push these prices even higher through 2024 and 2025.
So, Derrell, what are we seeing on the future side of things?
The futures markets obviously went through a huge correction late last year. They've been bouncing back. I think we're over that. It was an overcorrection is really what it was. And it affected the big feeder cattle markets. And of course, the fed cattle markets were also impacted. But now I think we're coming on strong. I know last week, right before the cattle on feed report came out, the futures were up sharply on Friday. And, I think that'll carry forward, going forward here with the results of that report.
And Derrell, moving on to what is box beef looking like?
Box beef has been pretty flat. It's really been moving sideways most of this year. Now, I say that after the first of the year, we had that really cold weather that caused disruptions in packing plants and some pipeline issues. And so box beef jumped up, but once it did jump up into that sort of mid 290 range for choice box beef, it's been pretty sideways, just kind of up and down. It did go slightly above $300 a hundredweight for choice box beef again on Friday last week. And, beef production's been falling this year, so tighter supplies all around is going to continue to support these markets.
And Derrell, you mentioned that cattle on feed report, and starting off the conversation of that, can you just run us through some of those numbers?
Yeah, you bet. The February cattle on feed report showed that placements in the month of January were down about 7% on a year-over-year basis. Marketings were just even with a year ago. And so the February 1 on-feed total was also just about even with a year ago, just fractionally higher than 1 year ago. We've been above year-ago levels for the last several months. We built it up last fall. And this represents now, I think we're past that. We're coming down, and I expect to see these feedlot inventories tighten up more as we go forward.
So not expecting to be even with last year's numbers anymore, but instead a slight decline?
Yeah, I think it's going to continue down as we go forward. Again, placements will probably continue to be restricted. We just don't have the feeder cattle. We may see a little bit of a blip in February, or a little bit more than I don't know if it'll be up, but it won't be down as much as it could be because of these wheat pasture cattle that are coming in, perhaps. But all in all, feeder cattle numbers are going to tighten up sharply in the next couple of months, if not this continuing this next month.
Derrell, really any surprises then?
Not really any surprises in the report. Now, there was a wide range of estimates about placements, and there were some people that thought because of the cold weather we had in January that placements would be a lot smaller than they were. So from their perspective, perhaps the placements are not as friendly as they would be. I think other analysts were probably looking at about the levels that we got in the report. So it's kind of hard to predict how the market might react, but I really don't think there will be a long-lived negative reaction to the report, even if there might be an initial somewhat negative reaction to the report. We'll have to wait and see.
Overall, then, looking at the cattle market and this cattle on feed report, what do you feel moving forward for cattle producers?
There's a lot of tightness in these markets that is going to continue to support markets. And the market's focus really is on the cow-calf sector. Cattle numbers are low. We've talked about that in the past. The inventory report showed that. And so there is a real need to rebuild the cow herd once again. We've been through this before. The market is providing those incentives in terms of especially higher calf prices. And, we haven't really done it yet, but I think from this point forward, producers will begin to think about how they participate in that market. And that means saving some heifers going forward. Obviously, it's going to depend on weather conditions, and we're in generally better shape now, but there is certainly still some risk of reemerging drought as we go forward. So that'll be one of the factors we have to keep an eye on from this point forward.
You're seeing the cattle on wheat pastures starting to come off in Oklahoma.
Yeah, so we graze cattle through the wheat in Oklahoma and in the Southern Plains generally. And we have a couple of different production systems. And one of those is where we're going to graze cattle through the winter, but then pull them off of that wheat in time for the wheat to go ahead and mature and make a grain crop as well. So we call that dual purpose wheat production. And that's driven the end of the grazing part of that is a very fixed end of a restriction on that when the wheat reaches its physiological stage and it goes into reproductive stage to make a grain head. And so that varies a little bit when it happens every year, but it's anywhere from mid-February to mid-March across most of Oklahoma at least. And so it looks like it's happening in Oklahoma pretty quickly. The wheat's probably maturing a little faster than usual. And certainly the auction volume in Oklahoma this past week picked up pretty sharply. I think it's an indication that we are seeing some of that run of calves coming off of wheat that will take place here for the rest of this month and into the first part of March.
Another report that's come out involving cattle and livestock is trade, and it's wrapped up 2023.
Yeah, we got the December data for beef imports and exports and cattle trade. So, from a beef standpoint, what evolved through the year in 2023 was, some headwinds for beef exports. We expected to see that, and we did see that. So when we ended up the year, beef exports were down a little bit over 14% on a year-over-year basis. Again, supplies are tighter in the U.S., prices are higher, and we've generally had a strong dollar most of the time. So all of those things are headwinds for exports. The market is behaving and reacting much to the market conditions now, much like it has in the past when we've seen similar situations. On the beef import side, it's exactly the opposite. All of those things, higher prices in the U.S., smaller supplies, and a strong dollar favors beef imports. So we expect to see some increase in imports, and we did see on an annual basis about almost a 10% increase in beef imports.
And Derrell, on the live cattle, what'd you see for trade?
On the live cattle trade, one of the numbers that people have keyed in on a little bit is the cattle imports from Mexico. They were up about 43% on a year-over-year basis. That sounds like a scary big number. And it was about 1.25 million head. If you look at it, the reason it was so big of an increase was because last year was so low. And so we had a sharp decrease in 2022, bounced back to more normal levels, actually pretty close to normal levels, just slightly elevated in 2023. It's important to kind of keep those in context. And even more so, we tend to talk about trade flows, especially cattle trade. I think we use the absolute numbers. So we got 1.2 million head of feeder cattle from Mexico. That sounds like an awfully big number in isolation. But if you think about Mexican cattle imports as a percentage of our calf crop in the U.S., it has averaged for about 30 years between 3 and 3.5% of our calf production. So it's actually a pretty minor, modest level of imports. And so it's important to kind of keep that in mind. We're not seeing any trends in that. I mean, it's just kind of the normal business. We do also export a few cattle to Mexico and Canada, but the net inflows of cattle from both of those countries into the U.S. is certainly the biggest part of that.
Talked about our neighbors to the south, but what about to the north in Canada?
Canadian cattle imports were actually down slightly on a total basis for the year in 2023. And again, it's important to keep in mind, and those numbers are around 700,000 head. I don't really have the exact number at the moment, but Canada is a little bit more of a mixed bag of cattle trade with the U.S. So a significant portion of the cattle imports from Canada are actually fed cattle coming out of Canadian feedlots ready to go to slaughter, and they do go straight to slaughter in the U.S. There's another portion that is actually cull cows and bulls that get marketed to the packers, just like our cull cows and bulls do in the U.S. And then there is a little piece of the Canadian imports that are feeder cattle, much like the Mexican cattle, that go straight into U.S. feedlots. And so, again, we're seeing fairly normal trade there. No major changes, no major trends in those markets. It's just, it's just kind of the usual flow of cattle and beef in the North American combined market.
Derrell, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today and give us our cattle market update.
You're very welcome. Anytime.
That was Oklahoma State University livestock economist Derrell Peel. We're cutting to a short break now on Agriculture Today, but stick around because we have more for you ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we continue our Monday show with an update about Ukraine from K-State Associate in the Department of Agricultural Economics, Antonina Broyaka. It's been about 2 years since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, and Antonina starts off her discussion with how Ukraine is doing financially.
In 2023, according to the latest estimates of the National Bank of Ukraine, the real GDP of Ukraine grew by 5.7%. This is a recovery growth after a sharp decline of 28.8% in 2022 when the war started. Despite the recovery, GDP is still about a quarter smaller than in 2021. In the first quarter of 2023, GDP was still failing, but it was growing for the remaining 3 quarters. The NBU believes that Ukraine's GDP will grow by 3.6% in 2024 and by 5.8% in 2025. The key prerequisite for economic recovery next year is a reduction of security risks, in particular for agricultural export. Agricultural sector has always been the main driver of Ukrainian economy, making up the largest share of Ukrainian GDP. Since the beginning of the war, its share slightly declined. However, it was the growth of the agricultural export, in particular grain production and export, that ensured the growth of Ukraine's GDP in 2023 compared to 2022. And we hope that despite the war, it will continue to grow next year, although this is a very difficult task considering the lack of profitability of agricultural production.
Antonina then transitions her conversation to talking about the amount of destruction that has been done.
The total amount of direct documented damages caused to Ukraine's infrastructure due to the war reached $156 billion at replacement cost, as of January 2024. Disruption to economic flows and production, as well as additional costs associated with the war, are collectively measured as economic losses amounting to around $500 billion. The housing stocks remain in a first place in terms of damage due to the hostilities, and systematically shelling the number of damaged and destroyed residential buildings increases every day, burying civilians under the ruins. Total damages in the agricultural sector amounted $10.3 billion, while losses amounted $69.8 billion. These figures include damage and losses related to destruction of the Kakhovka Dam, the partial or complete destruction of storage facilities, fisheries and aquacultures, perennial crops, livestock, etc. At least 160,000 units of agricultural machinery have been damaged, destroyed, or seized, which is 57% of total damages. The war-induced losses include losses of farm income due to lower and foregone production, lower farm gate prices due to export logistic disruption, higher farm production costs due to higher prices of fertilizers and fuel, the cost of land recultivation after mine release surveying, clearance, and land release operation.
Next, she talks about what they've worked on restoring.
The restoration of Ukrainian agricultural industry is a long process that depends on many factors, in particular the attraction of investment and financing, the stability of the export routes, and the introduction of new progressive agricultural practices to make it better than it was. According to the latest estimates made by the World Bank last week in a collaboration with United Nations and Ukrainian government, the total recovery and reconstruction needs in the agricultural sector exceeded $56 billion over next 10 years, including $435 million in 2024. To ensure that agricultural sector recovers, drives the overall economic recovery, serves as a decent income source for farmers, and provide for Ukrainian population, several investments are especially important. This includes addressing liquidity constraints, investing in resilience to disaster and climate changes, investing in integrated food energy system, and strengthening the agricultural public institution to effectively support recovery and reconstruction, as well as EU accession. The near doubling of total recovery and reconstruction needs during the last year derives from the increase in total damages and losses during the period. There is a separate project for Kakhovka Dam reconstruction worth $180 million, but it can be done before liberation. Cleaning of mines is estimated also separately. The current total cost for the clearance of explosive subject across all Ukraine is around $34.6 billion, among which roughly $15 billion are needed to demine agricultural land. During 2023, Ukrainian sappers examined 274,000 hectares of agricultural land, and this is very good results. It's 58% of what was planned to be done in 4 years. Ukraine is also receiving technical support for demining. And for example, in November, the American company Tetra Tech began demining work in 5 regions of Ukraine. And also the Howard Buffett Foundation provided mechanized demining machines to Ukraine.
Continuing her conversation, she discusses what Ukraine is hoping for 2024.
For the next season of 2024, it is expected, so there are 2 estimates, like optimistic and pessimistic, and under the optimistic scenario, The sown area under grain will decrease by just 3% to 10.2 million hectares, and under oil crops it's gonna increase by 1% to 8.4 million hectares. But under the pessimistic scenario, the sown area under grain crops will decrease by 17% to 9.1 million hectares, as well as oil seeds to 6.9, or by 16% of what we have now. And the sown area, first of all, will decrease in areas close to the front line, as well as the areas far from the seaports and western border of the country, so namely in the eastern and northeastern region. So what we expect, that is hard to predict what we will have next year. This is our result for this year in terms of harvest. And as I mentioned earlier, we expect totally have, when we finished our corn, 82 million tons, which is more than previous year, including almost 61 million tons of grain and 21 million tons of oil seeds. And this is our export potential for grain in this season, and we expect to export around 50 million tons, including 41.7 million tons of grain. And our prediction is pretty close. I mean, the Ministry of Agriculture of Ukraine is pretty close to what USDA lately published in February. So we'll see how it will perform, but of course it will depend from the operation of Black Sea ports. So it is hard to predict how harvest and export for the next season will perform, since the area is still occupied, mined, and a lot of uncertainties, and we actually even cannot really plan our sowing campaign on areas close to active hostilities. But anyway, we expect that situation will improve. And actually, our tendency shows that if the war wouldn't happen in Ukraine, Ukraine would be already able to have 5-year average over 100 million tons of grain and oil seeds per year, and export over 80 million tons. This level still can be reached after the occupation and the mining of all territory. As for now, our goal is to keep our 5-year average production at the level of 78 million tons and 50 million tons of export of grain and oil seeds, and improve our average by 92 in next 5 years for production and 60 for export. So this is our expectation, but as I said, everything will depend on the war development.
That was K-State Associate in the Department of Agricultural Economics, Antonina Broyaka. You can find her full Ukraine update on AgManager.info, and I will also link it in today's show notes on agtoday.net. We're cutting to a short break now, but we'll be back with more ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we conclude our Monday show hearing from a sophomore in Wildlife and Outdoor Enterprise Management at Kansas State University, Lilly Nelson. Lilly, thanks for joining us today.
Hi.
Lilly, you're currently at Kansas State University, majoring in the WOEM program, and could you first tell us what led you to K-State and this program?
So I've always grown up in the outdoors, hunting and shooting. My family is a huge outdoors family. I never really loved the outdoors or anything, but when I was about 15, I went to the NRA Whittington Center Adventure Camp, and that is a 2-week shooting camp where you get to learn all disciplines of marksmanship. And I fell in love with that. And everyone, when I was deciding to go to K-State, everyone always told me to do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. And so I found this program through a really weird way. My grandpa worked with a girl that was in this program a couple of years before me, and I read an article that she had wrote about it, and it sounded like a dream. It sounded too good to be true. So I came to K-State and visited and met with one of my now professors, and it still sounded like a dream, but I decided to pursue it and do what I love and get a degree out of it.
As you've spent almost 2 years now in the program, what has it been like?
The program's really awesome. I love all the hands-on stuff we get to do. It's a very hands-on program. We get to do different trips to go learn all about different shooting sports. We take lots of different little field trips to go down to the river and learn stuff just hands-on, and that's one of my favorite parts of the program in general. I also just love how specific the things that we are learning are. They're very interesting, and it just makes you want to learn more about each topic that we're going into. And then another thing I really love is just the community environment that the program has. Since it is such a small program, I do get to know all the other students in the program as well as our faculty, which are all really great. And so it's really great to just have that small little community to get to know.
And we obviously hear from Drew and Joe quite often, who are within that program and are your professors. And so as you're learning from them and other people within the program and your classmates, what are you hoping to pursue after college?
So after college, my hope is to go into the firearms industry. That's always been my passion. I don't know exactly what I want to do within the industry, but I'm really excited for whatever opportunities presents itself when the time comes to be looking for a career. Recently, I've really been into the shotgun sport side of things. I got to go down to the NSCA National Championship with Drew earlier this year, and that really opened up my eyes to a whole other side of the industry that I'd never really experienced before. So I'm kind of looking into something maybe along the lines of there, but I'm really just excited for whatever opportunities present itself when the time comes.
And do you know what some of your classmates are hoping to do post-college? Because there's many options with this degree.
Yeah, so some of my classmates are looking to do like opening an outfitter, so guiding all kinds of hunts, as well as like land management companies where they'll go in and manage your land for different purposes, such as like upland game bird, waterfowl, or big game management.
Lily, beforehand, you also mentioned that you do some work for the WOEM program.
Yeah, so I am our social media manager. So I started doing this last semester. Essentially what I do is manage all of our social media. So I make social media posts just promoting the program and different things that we have going on. Recently I've been doing a student spotlight every Friday. So we'll highlight a different student within the program to hopefully reach out to prospective students that might be in the program so they get to know a little bit more about what people are wanting to do with the program and what they love about the program.
For people who love being outdoor but maybe don't have firearm experience or aren't well incorporated into that, would you still encourage them to take the time to look at this program?
Absolutely. This program is very open to all people from all different backgrounds. I know a couple of students in the program now that had never touched a firearm before they came into the program. But everyone, just the community aspect is just so strong within the program that we are so welcoming to anyone from any background, whether you've never hunted before or you've been a hunter for your entire life. Our professors and the other students will guide them and push them along the right track and help them figure out exactly what they're doing within the program.
And as we round out today's conversation, Lily, what is your favorite thing about the College of Agriculture and the WOEM program?
My favorite thing is definitely the community. I know I've talked about that a lot today, but it really is such an incredible community. Our professors are really incredible. They're so caring and loving towards each and every student. They really, truly do care what you're doing, and they're so passionate about what they're teaching that it really makes students want to learn more.
That was Lilly Nelson, a sophomore in K-State's Wildlife and Outdoor Enterprise Management program. I will link the WOEM website in today's show notes on agtoday.net. That's all we have for you today on Agriculture Today, but we'll be back with more for you tomorrow.